right, let's do one more question. What do we got?
Okay. Questions from K-Man. Do you have any recommendations for my 16-year-old son who is now reading your books and listening to your podcast? He would like to create multiple streams of income and enjoy a deeply satisfying life. Let us know. We'll be listening.
Well, I mean, first of all, good for your son. Like, let that be the underlying piece of this answer, is just to have someone at that age who is thinking so intentionally about their life is like a superpower. When you're 35 and starting and thinking really intentional about your life, it's like welcome to the club. Like, everyone at that point is starting to think through, like, oh, what works for me, what doesn't, how should I organize my efforts, what do I want to do? At 16, almost no one's doing that. Or if they're doing that, they're doing it in a very simplistic formalism, like the millennial obsession with following your passion, like some notion of like, well, there's one job I'm meant to do, and my job is to figure out what that is. Very few people your age are thinking so systematically. So that by itself is going to yield lots of benefits, irregardless of any particular advice I now give you going forward. Now, let me provide you, I took some notes on this. I was looking at this question before. So I want to try to provide some relatively rough advice for you as someone who is young, to lay a foundation of support of sorts that will support a deep life as you enter adulthood. Now, the main thing I want to say to set up this foundation before we get to these specifics is be wary about getting too specific right now at your age at 16 about what your sort of post-schooling adult life is going to be like in terms of specific sources of income, etc. It's very difficult as a 16-year-old, for example, to get 23, what your life's going to be like at 23, to get those details right. Because you don't have knowledge yet of what you're going to be exposed to and what opportunities are going to be open to you. So this is really the right time to be much more laying a foundation for being able to take advantage of opportunities and build this lifestyle when the time comes as you enter adulthood. So I would say don't worry about the specifics yet. Let's work on you right now to make you into a deep life generation machine so that you 4 or 5 years from now is going to be well suited to start crafting a really cool life. So here's a few things I wrote down. Number 1, be 10 times more organized and intentional about your academic work than everyone else you know. Most students are terrible at study strategies. Most students are terrible at time management as a student. If you are not, you can reduce the amount of time it requires for you to perform your schoolwork at a certain level by a factor of 3 or 4. It really is almost like a magic trick. I learned this from experience. You start treating your student life like a job, like a 35-year-old would treat their job, and it becomes significantly easier. Its footprint on your life becomes significantly easier. The amount of stress it causes will reduce down to very little, and you will be able to perform academically at the very height of your potential without grinding it out, without overloading or overburdening yourself. So, I wrote a book about this, How to Become a Straight A Student. That's for college kids. I wrote another book called How to Be a High School Superstar. If you look at the part 1 playbook for that book, I adapt a lot of those study and time management advice from college to the high school context. So you might find value in both of those. So the Straight A Student book and the part 1 playbook from How to Become a High School Superstar. The story I always tell is I was a reasonable student my first year of college. At the end of the first year of college, I got serious about my academic strategies. I started treating the problem of how do you do well as a student like an entrepreneur would treat the problem of how do I learn how to market? How do I find a new audience? Because I'd run a business. I was used to that way of thinking. I brought that way of thinking to my academic work, and I jumped from a good student, B plus, A minus student, to 4 O's starting my sophomore fall, every single quarter till I graduated, except for 1 A minus in my senior spring. Ended up graduating with a 3.95 GPA. If I had done this 1 quarter earlier, I probably would have been the valedictorian of my class at Dartmouth. I did not get smarter between the summer of my freshman year and my sophomore year. What made me unique is I was one of the only people on that campus to start experimenting with what's the right way to take notes, what's the right way to study for a math test, what's the right way to study for an art history test, how can I manage my time so I don't have to ever work past 8 p.m. It was much easier than you would think. All right, so be 10 times more organized and intentional about your academic work. Number 2, introduce some discipline into your life. So you get used to the idea of having a disciplined life. There's things that are important but hard, and you're willing to do that work over time and see the results in the long term. You probably should have some sort of physical discipline. So some sort of sports or training, something that you do that will put you in better health or shape than just sort of the average person you know who's not a serious athlete. You should have some sort of mental discipline in there built around the reading of hard physical books. I'd probably recommend that above all else for someone your age, that you have some sort of systematic program of study involving real books that you read. You have set times you put aside. Have 2 or 3 things like this, just so you have a self-image as someone who is disciplined. And again, the details don't matter because you just need to, when the time comes, when you're 24 or whatever, the time comes for your discipline is going to unlock something awesome. You want to already have that tool sharpened. All right, number 3, be very wary of video games, of social media. Your time is very valuable right now because you get leverage. Interesting moves or developments or opportunities you unlock when you're young have the maximum amount of time to actually earn experiential interest and start generating really cool things. So don't waste your teenage years, your early 20s, your college years. Don't waste 40% of your discretionary time in Call of Duty. Don't waste 40% of your time on TikTok. Maybe that's okay for some people, but I can tell right now that this is a kid who is awesome, is at it, he's on it, he's listening to deep questions, he's reading my books, he's intentional, he's already thinking about multiple income streams. So be very wary of those devices. Be the guy who's weird about I just don't really use my phone. Let that be your thing. All right, number 4, expose yourself to bulk positive randomness. That's a term that comes from my longtime friend, Ben Casnocha, who wrote about that in his memoir of being a teenage entrepreneur prodigy. So starting companies in his teenage years. Startup of You is what that book is called. And he talks about this a lot. Expose yourself to lots of interesting stuff all the time to see what clicks, what sticks, what ends up resonating and holding your attention the next day or the next week. Go hear speakers, read interesting things, go to interesting documentaries, go to conventions. Expose yourself to bulk positive randomness. This is how you get eventually something really interesting clicking in your life. And now to pull from my book, How to Become a High School Superstar, once there is something that catches your attention that you're pursuing, you want to pursue what I call the failed simulation effect, which is you want to get to a place with that activity, if you're a young person, where people say, I have no idea how he did that. And the way you generate that effect, which is incredibly powerful and opens up all these interesting opportunities, is you just keep leveraging up. You do one thing that's kind of explainable. You use that to get access to the next thing. You use that to get access to the third thing. That third thing you use access to get to the fourth thing. And by the time you get to that fourth thing, that might be interviewing Supreme Court justices for my podcast as a 17-year-old. That thing seems like I have no idea how a 17-year-old does that. But if you look to 3 steps before, that started with you being exposed to a court reporter at an internship. Yes, the path makes sense, but not when you see the final thing. Maybe that's a confusing explanation. I have a whole chapter about this in my book. I also wrote about this, interestingly enough, for Tim Ferriss's blog way back in the day when I first met Tim. So it's on there somewhere. We're talking 2007, 2008, probably. I wrote an article for tim.blog back when that was his main online platform about the failed simulation effect. So you can actually find my article on his blog. I'd probably just search for my name and tim.blog or something like that. But anyways, you expose yourself to interesting stuff. When something clicks, you keep going, keep going, keep going. The first 6 months you're working on something, it's interesting to you, but not to the outside world. You get to a year plus 6 months, and you might be at a place now with that interest where people have no idea how you did that at your age, and that's when really cool opportunities open up. Number 5, study character and leadership. Expose yourself to examples of people who live with great character, who act as great leaders, even during difficult times. Read biographies, read profiles, watch documentaries. Maybe if they have a social media presence, so maybe like a Jocko Willink type, if that resonates, maybe you're listening to his podcast and the military professionals he has on that tell tales of valor, whatever it is that resonates, you want to be imprinting young a real affiliation or affinity for character and leadership, especially during difficult times. That is going to be a North Star or a guiding light through all sorts of different ups and downs and competing pressures and diversions you're going to experience the next, let's say, 10 years of your life. Now's the time to start building up those examples. And number 6, serve people. One way or the other, be doing that now. And it's just setting the habit of, and it could just be volunteering. It could be this is this cause, or online, I go and I help, I'm in this community just to help these people. Whatever it is, you also want that imprinted into your soul at a young age, that serve other people, because that's what you need to fall back on when the other pursuit you have isn't going well. This company failed and I lost this job and I really am feeling down on myself because I had these ambitions that I was going to be Michael Crichton at 27, and instead I'm at, I'm getting to that age and I'm short on money and my plans didn't work. You fall back on helping others. Well, you know what? Let me just put that energy to helping others while I also am trying to figure myself out. The more you can fall back on how can I serve or help other people, the more emotional and psychological resilience you're going to have for all the ups and downs that are going to come. It's what's going to prevent you from ending up instead 26 and bitter and on Twitter and just mad and yelling at people and medicated 7 ways to Sunday and just not even sure what to do with your life. You'll end up maybe like an ideological groupie for some weird whatever and just be miserable. And you don't want to be there. So falling back on serving others as a default is that buffer, is that protection. Be useful to the world, be useful to others. Let that also be a guiding light. All right, so those are my 6 pieces of advice. But good for you for thinking about this stuff at such a young age. You do these things, you're going to be a rock star. You're going to be a rock star in college. You're going to come out of college and be living a life that you are going to have full control on the reins of this life. And when you start doing lifestyle-centric career planning seriously, which you really should wait till a little bit later in college to do so, you are going to have options. And whatever comes out of those initial lifestyle-centric career planning exercises, you're going to be able to shape your life there. Live a deep life and a useful life. So I'm glad you asked that question. That's my advice.